Hey, I'm Stephanie from REEDSY, and in this video I have 5 tips that will help you write a short story that a magazine will want to publish. Short stories are so much fun. They're a great way to start getting your work out there, submit to publishers, and maybe even start your career as a writer. In this video, we're covering the writing process, not the process of submitting to publishers. If you want to learn more about that, check out all of the videos that I've linked in the description to learn how to submit to publishers. Tip number 1 is be specific. Here's what's uniquely expected of a short story: that it delivers a specific emotional punch, tells about a specific event, as opposed to a novel, which is more about immersing you in a world and characters in the story. Short stories have a specific word count. They're usually between 1,500 and 7,500 words, or 5 to 15 typed pages. If you're submitting to a literary magazine that is in print, you might sway a little bit more towards a shorter short story, like 5,000 words or less. In fact, the writer Elizabeth Gilbert tells this amazing story about how she first got published, and it was with Esquire magazine. She wrote a short story called Pilgrims, and they wanted her to cut 1/3 of her story after she had already revised and edited and whittled it down big time. She didn't think that the essence of her story would remain with that much cutting, but she was glad that she eventually made the revisions and made her short story as short and as essential as possible, because that was the start of her career. As a writer, there are so many different lengths that you could choose from. A flash or a very short story is 1,000 words or less. A novella is just over 17,000 all the way to 40,000 words. And novels are considered to be a minimum of 40,000, but usually live in that 50 to 100,000 word range. So does your idea feel naturally contained within the parameters of a short story? One way to answer that question is to think about the specific content you want to deal with. This includes maybe specificity around your character. Maybe there's only 1 or 2 as opposed to a whole cast of characters. Maybe you have a specific plot, maybe even just one event that you're telling as opposed to a plot with many subplots. Maybe you have 1 or 2 specific ideas that you want to convey in the short story format. Why else might you choose the length of a short story? Well, as opposed to a novel, which usually follows the beginning, middle, end, more traditional structure, a short story allows for more experimentation in the plot structure. So if you have a creative idea and you want to break away from that traditional journey of a novel, go with a short story. I'll give you some great ideas about experimental plot structures in tip number 3. The final point under be specific has to do with using specific language, which is always good advice for any type of writing, any length. Because you're working with a constrained word count, every word matters. Short stories are a place for very efficient word choice. Tip number 2 is have a strong hook. The first page, and sometimes just the first sentence, can be the only chance that you get with a magazine editor. So you have to make it count and hook them right away. How? There's lots of ways. You can get to the inciting event quickly. You can minimize descriptions of setting and maximize action. Introduce your main character early on. Reveal their desires or motivations, their fears, their beliefs and misbeliefs. Show why the events happening in your short story matter to the character. We'll talk more about that in tip number 4. Finally, avoid hook cliches like your character's waking up at the beginning of the story or dreaming. It's just that the magazine editors have read these a million times and you want to stand out. Final note on writing a strong hook. I know it's intimidating. Don't start with the blank page thinking that you have to nail the beginning of your story right away. Of course, you can start writing from anywhere in your story. Tip number 3 is experiment with plot structure. Novels traditionally have a clear beginning, middle, and end. They allow the reader to become immersed. What's great about a short story structure is that it can be flexible. As a writer, you have the chance to be more creative and experimental with the plot. If you want to follow a traditional structure, go for it. Your character can solve a problem, fail, try again, find a resolution, and change in some way. You could also go with an untraditional structure. For example, a non-linear or fractured narrative, a circular narrative that begins and ends in the same place, but we come back with more understanding, a montage of objects that tell a story, even an internal dialogue, a story that takes place largely in someone's head. Writing is art, so do it your unique way and you may stand out to the publisher you're submitting to. Tip 4, know your characters. In a short story, you may not have the time to flesh out your characters like you would in a novel, but you can still make them 3-dimensional. Make sure to include not just the external conflict, but that internal conflict, some part of your main character's identity or beliefs that are being challenged. Know why the events of your story matter to your main character. This will help your story matter to your reader, but more on that in the last tip. Your character arc in a short story may not be that 180-degree transformation that you get with a long journey in a novel, but your character can be changed or transformed, even if it's just by one small specific event. Tip number 5 is have a meaning that matters. Your short story should be infused with some truth or idea or meaning that matters to you. If it matters to you, you can make it matter to your characters and matter to the reader. The writing that gets published is unique. The writer is speaking with an artistic voice that is all their own. Of course, this takes a lot of time to develop, so be gentle on yourself, but know that you have a specific life and unique experiences that have led you to develop the convictions and beliefs and perspectives that you can share in your writing. Give your reader a takeaway that stays with them and leaves them a little bit changed. So that's 5 tips on writing a short story that a magazine will want to publish, but here's the caveat. When you're making art, you don't have to follow rules, but when you know the rules, you can break them intelligently and use them when they suit you. The more you know, the more artistic freedom you actually have. So make sure to subscribe to our channel so you can continue your learning with writing and publishing. You got this. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.